All right, it's your buddy, it's your pal, Mike Messier. Kind of a change of climate, quite literally. I want to share a wrestling story with everyone, um, and it's just a wrestling story that's funny. I think it's funny, but I'm also thankful I didn't get beat up. Quite honestly, it was 2002. I was a young guy, just kind of had done some ring announcing, some commentary, and but I really wanted to be a wrestling manager. I really wanted to be in the style of a, at the time Paulie Dangerously or even a Jim Cornette or someone like that. Just a loud smack talking manager. I had done a few wrestling matches, very very few matches, and I could talk, but I wasn't a great wrestler, quite honestly. But I did think I could do the managing position. And at the time, this Ring of Honor promotion was really starting to do some shows up in Massachusetts. So I took a road trip with a friend of mine who later became quite an accomplished referee in the wrestling world. So I went up to New England, and I kind of came in character. Like I had a sport coat, I had a doll, like a giant doll. And the doll's gimmick was Lucy Leprosy. It was like this giant plastic doll, about 4 feet tall, and some of the parts of the doll were falling off, like half a finger or a leg. So I'm walking around this, this pro wrestling show somewhere in Massachusetts, 2002 Ring of Honor, and even I'll give Ring of Honor credit. They did really start doing quite well right off the bat, so to speak. They were already getting, 300 or 400 or 500 people in this building. And this was a pretty packed show at the time. I mean, I want to say Christopher Daniels wrestled AJ Styles. I believe one of the big highlights was young CM Punk against Raven in a tag team match where each guy had like a special partner. Raven was definitely the biggest name on the show. I mean, he was just a year out of WWE at the time. And Raven still looked great, was still really in intense shape. I want to say that even Just Incredible was there too. But going back to the anecdote, so we get to the show. My friend just kind of goes in, and I kind of, I was kind of in a wrestled up state of mind, meaning that I was very passionate about wrestling, very passionate about wanting to get into the business. And I had been reading all these books, by DDP and Mick Foley, kind of that early wave of wrestling books where these wrestlers told all these stories, and especially Diamond Dallas Page, I think, told how he kind of, I wouldn't say backdoored his way into the business, but just different situations that he kind of, was at Norma Jeans or whatever, bouncing or running bars. And, so it always seemed to me that to really get into the wrestling business, it wasn't necessarily about, being a good little boy and writing a resume to WWE, or it always seemed like you just had to get yourself noticed somehow. Like you had to do something wacky or fucking weird just to get these guys' attention. At least that's what I was validating my behavior with. So I get to the show, I got the whole big crazy doll, and even before the show started, somehow somebody told us, or I noticed, that in the back of this, it had to be like a high school auditorium or something, that the wrestlers' dressing room was in the back of the building, but it was kind of an open-doored thing. Like they didn't have any security or any system or security guard or anything. That it was just kind of a trust system to keep the fans away from the wrestlers in the back. Like I don't know how else to explain it, except like anyone with any common sense at that time would just stay the hell away. But of course, as I said, I was so wrestled up in my mind, all this motivation and all this passion and all this stuff going through my system. So I go to the back, and I basically just walked into the fucking dressing room. And, quite immediately, because no one really knew who the hell I was, they just didn't want me there. And it wasn't anything personal. They didn't know me one way or the other, but just a couple of guys were like, who is this guy? What's this guy doing? And I just started making a beeline to everybody who I could talk to that I recognized, trying to pitch myself as their manager. Like, hey, I want to be your manager. And I'm talking to the top guys in Ring of Honor at the time, which was still an up-and-coming promotion, but basically the guys that I remember vividly being there are Samoa Joe and Homicide. And just with names like that, you don't really want to mess with these guys. And just a couple of big dudes. And I want to give them, credit and thanks, quite honestly, for not hurting me physically. Because both Samoa Joe and Homicide said to me quite bluntly, without being, rude or throwing punches or anything, just say, hey, man, you got to get out of here. Just a real casual, almost soft-spoken quality, especially with Samoa Joe, of, hey, you got to go. And it wasn't a threat. It wasn't, it wasn't anything like that. It was just a real matter of fact, you better get the fuck out. And I was so hyped up in my head, I heard what they were saying, and I didn't disrespect them, but at the same time, I wasn't exactly leaving either. So finally, Christopher Daniels, who at the time was probably one of the biggest stars on that show, came over, and I would say he kind of appeased the situation. He took me aside. He asked me what the hell was wrong with me, or what was I thinking, what was I doing? And I explained to him that I wanted to be a manager in the wrestling business, and I had some experience as a ring announcer, and he appreciated it. I think something might have happened where I gave him my information, email or a phone number or something. And just I will give Daniels a lot of credit that he baby-faced it and got that situation taken care of. So the next part of the story was basically I left the dressing room. I went about my business, back to being a fan. And I remembered as I'm leaving that I've no longer got my eyeglasses. I've left my eyeglasses behind. Not this same pair of glasses, but a similar pair of yellow tinted glasses I left right there in the dressing room. So I had to go back, and guess what? Christopher Daniels gave me my glasses back. So he just kind of looked down, he gave me the glasses back, and then I was off and doing my business once again as a fan. So if there's any moral to this story, it's that when you're a wrestling fan and you want to get into the business, sometimes you have to try these things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. It was just a kind of a funny incident. Went back to the show, watched all the matches, but the whole night I was kind of just distracted and just kind of feeling like, is Daniels ever going to call me or email me? He still hasn't. It's been about 16 years now. And Gary Michael Capetta was there, and it was just kind of an interesting night. I remember eventually just kind of not even really caring about the show that much, although it was a really good show. And I remember talking to CM Punk briefly, a young, angry CM Punk. Even before the show, Raven signed Lucy Leprosy's head, the doll that I had, my gimmick. Raven signed her head. I remember speaking briefly to Alexis Lurie, who would become Mickie James in a few years. And I remember talking to Mickie James and saying something. I don't know how I put this together, but I said something to her like, "Hey, you remind me of a young Sunshine." And I was referring to the world-class championship wrestling, female valet for Chris Adams and Jimmy Garvin. And Alexis Lurie just did not know who the fuck Sunshine was. She totally did not understand that reference. She might have thought I meant the actual sun in the sky. But anyway, that's a Mike Wrestling story. I had told this story on an episode of JG's podcast, but unfortunately it got cut off. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening to this anecdote. And I don't know if you've learned anything from it or if it's amused you. But if it has, you're more than welcome to subscribe to the Mike Messier, YouTube channel and all this ships at sea, MikeMessier.com and so on and so forth. But basically, Samoa Joe and Homicide, thank you guys for not hurting me physically. Thanks Christopher Daniels kind of diffusing the situation and returning my glasses so I was able to drive home properly. It's Mike Messier, MikeMessier.com with an anecdote. Okay, goodbye.